Exactly 1 week until Georgia's midterm primary election, more than 400,000 people have already voted, record numbers for early voting in a primary. Joining me right now is NBC News political director Chuck Todd. Chuck, the early voting numbers here are up big time, 150% compared to the primary 2 years ago and up 200% from 2018. Why do you think this primary seems to be capturing the interest and attention of our voters more than any other recent vote?
Well, I think look, number one, there's nothing like becoming where all the voters realize their vote counts and you're a battleground state. And Georgia, I think the fact that Georgia appeared to deliver the presidency and control of the U.S. Senate and was a pivotal state, I think, that's something. I've always said that voters, sometimes battleground states create swing voters and sometimes swing voters create battleground states. And the point being, I think more voters realize, oh my goodness, my vote counts. So that, number one. Number two, I think the reason you're seeing a bigger early vote is you had more people vote early before because of the pandemic. Frankly, people like the convenience. Every place that it's been introduced, it only gets more popular every time. So I think the combination of number one, of the apparent importance that your vote counts, and you saw it up close and personal in 2020 and in that runoff, and the fact that the convenience of early voting, that people liked what they got to do in 2020, and as we've seen anywhere in the country where it's been introduced, it only seems to grow in use.
Excellent points. And at the top of the ballot statewide is the governor's race. We have Stacey Abrams. She has no opposition on the Democratic side, but Republican Governor Brian Kemp has 4 challengers, including former Senator David Perdue. Now, despite name recognition and an endorsement from former President Trump, Perdue's campaign never really picked up steam. So is it too early to say that Trump's Midas effect, at least in this race, may be dwindling?
Look, I think that the fact is Trumpism is still very popular and very strong in the Republican Party. But I think sort of it really is race dependent and it's candidate dependent here. And I think that David Perdue's as much to blame for the inability of his campaign to take off as Donald Trump was. Look, Donald Trump talked Perdue into this race. It's pretty clear, right? Perdue was looking at running in the Senate, and then he decided not to. And then Donald Trump was frustrated he couldn't get anybody to challenge Kemp, and then he talked David Perdue into doing it late. But you can, then the reason it's pretty obvious, not only does the reporting support the fact that he talked him into it, but just look at the campaign Perdue has run. He doesn't really have a rationale for why he wants to be governor. He has a rationale for why he wants to unseat Kemp, and it's really the beef that Trump has with Kemp. But, what are you going to do differently as governor? And, he's been sort of throwing spaghetti at the wall. Last week it became about the abortion issue, and that's, when I saw him do that, I think I realized it's so hard to knock off an incumbent governor. I think the hardest thing to do besides knocking off an incumbent president in a primary is knocking off an incumbent governor. Does not happen very often. Some can get dragged into runoffs. We're going to see that in Alabama, but I don't even think Kemp's going to end up in a runoff here. And it just is a reminder that if you don't have you gotta make a case for why the other person should be fired. And it can't really be something about the past, right? You got to have the grievances got to sort of matter in the everyday lives of people. And I think that's the missing piece here for Perdue.
Yeah, a lot has been brought up about the last presidential election in their debates with each other. What other key races or trends, maybe even issues like Roe v. Wade's impact on this election, that you'll be watching for next Tuesday night as we begin to see the results come in?
Well, look, I am curious to see, number one, if Herschel Walker is somehow, if his number starts to fall lower than we think, right? If it's more in the mid to high 50s or even low 60s rather than 70s or 80s, that means that some of this skepticism on Walker took hold, and it tells you that perhaps some of that Oppo research could impact a general election down the road. I'm also very curious about Democratic turnout. While the Republican primaries seem to be the bigger races, there is obviously a member of Congress, sort of intra-party primary there that's taking place in the Atlanta metro area. And just what is that turnout disparity between the two parties? Democrats, on one hand, nationally don't have a lot to turn out about, but Stacey Abrams and Raphael Warnock are both very popular with the base of the party. Does their presence on the ballot give a boost to Democratic turnout that we've not seen in some of these other states. It's something else I'm watching for.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you, Chuck, that looking at the early voting numbers, more Republicans have turned out to come out and vote for in this early season. So we'll see what happens on Election Day. Chuck Todd, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.